remembered it wasn't evening. That's a good start. Well, thank you all for turning out. I mean, you know, on a sunny summer's afternoon, and we haven't had a lot of those, it's good to see a room full. So, welcome. Another season of lecture meetings starts today. This is the only one that you'll have to come out in the afternoon to. The rest will be in the evening. But although you had a month off, the committee didn't. Since we last met, this is a plea, so pay attention. Since we last met, the new display cabinet has arrived at the library. But Matt, the library manager, is struggling. He's not a flat pack expert, and he's struggling with the shelves. So if anybody thinks they can help, come and talk to me afterwards, and I'll arrange to get you together. We'll find a shelf for you. The society attended the picnic in the park the other Saturday. That was well attended, and a lot of interest was shown in our photographic collection. Our next meeting, we will revert to Friday evenings again. That will be Friday the 6th of September, here, 7 p.m. Oh, it's you.
No, it isn't.
Might have known it was you causing trouble. What have you got that makes a noise then? So the next meeting will be Friday the 6th of September, here, 7 o'clock. Our speaker will be Lorraine Jones, and she will be talking to us about Kimmelcamp. 2025 calendars will be available at that meeting and at successive meetings for the unchanged price of £6. That's 3 years on the run, they've been £6. Rachel Reeves leads to learn a message. They will also be available at the community market on the second Saturday of each month. After the talk today, there will be tea, coffee and homemade cake. I'm still smelling it in the kitchen at home. Lovely. Right, this afternoon we welcome Fiona Gale, MBE, a retired, if you ever do retire, archaeologist. Fiona has been instrumental and responsible for quite a few things locally, in the success of the Heritage Lottery Fund project in a bid, in the support of the Pontsilta Aqueduct and Canal Work Heritage Site, a number of major conservation projects, most notably the 2 million Heritage Lottery funded Heather and Hillfort's Landscape Partnership, a pioneering cross-disciplinary project that undertook conservation and access works on the Clwydian Range Iron Fort Hill, on the Iron Age Hill Forts. Get all that in the right order. And also heavily involved in the conservation of masonry at the iconic Castell Dinas Bran above Llangollen in partnership with Cadw. So, you know, she's got quite a lot going for her, and she's been a busy lady. But this afternoon, we welcome her, and she's going to talk to us about the Vale of Clwyd Railway.
Thank you very much.
Welcome, Fiona.
Thank you very much. Can you all hear me? Perfect. Can you see the screen? Yes. Perfect. If we need, I can get the lights turned off. I'm not sure whether that might make a difference. I think will help, won't it? I'm not sure. Thank you. Is that a bit better? Yes. Great. Wonderful. So, yeah, I retired as Denbighshire's county archaeologist 6 years ago now, but I've got myself involved in lots of things archaeological still. I'm a trustee of various organisations, but also I moved to Rhuddlan and I got myself involved in projects there. At the end, I can't hand them out now, but I've got leaflets about open doors in Rhuddlan, which takes place in about 3 weeks' time. I'm involved in that and various other things in Rhuddlan, of which the railway was one. Right at the very end, I'll start talking about the structure that was the reason for this whole project, but doing it I started finding out more about railways generally, but the Vale of Clwyd line in particular. I apologise to start with, I have got information about Rhuddlan Station, but the majority is about the Ripon area, because that's where the project that this is linked to it started and was. There are lots of other things going on in Ripon. This coming week, the clock, if you know the town, it's got a clock tower in the middle, that's going to be refurbished. The castle and various other dating of timber buildings and things has been ongoing there in recent years. In fact, I got a leaflet about the timber building project as well. But the railway, a little bit of sort of background history, and again, I'm not a railway buff. I couldn't, there'll be pictures of railway locomotives, and I have learned not to call them a train, because a train is the whole thing, apparently, the loco and the carriages. But I couldn't tell you what train locomotive they were, and I'm sure some of you will recognise certain ones of them. But a bit of general background about railways generally and in this area. But the first steam-powered passenger railway in Britain was the Liverpool and Manchester Railway, authorised Act of Parliament in 1826. And still today, if you are building a railway, you need an Act of Parliament. So the Llangollen line, which I'll touch on later, extended to Corwen, the new station opened last summer. But to do that extension, they needed another Act of Parliament. So all of these lines have Acts of Parliament, which is handy because that gives you all the dates when they were constructed. So first one, passenger one, 1826. There were earlier, some were wooden lines, some stone rails and things, but not powered railways. But going back to the 16th century, you get some tram lines really, where often linked to industry and mineral extraction, where often the tram line coming out, it's just gravity, so poor person on it just said you just kept going downhill and hoped you'd stop, and then trucks taken back up by train. Those maps just give you an idea how in the 19th century railways were developing all over the place, and the map of Britain was getting fuller and fuller of new lines. This, you may well have driven through the Horseshoe Pass, where, let me get my little pointer, that line there is a tram line. Predates these steam railways. It dates to the time when the canal in Llangollen was constructed, early 1800s, and it was carrying slate from the quarries that you see when you drive through the Horseshoe Pass down to the canal, and then they were taken off. There's also evidence from Bersham Ironworks of a wooden railway that was bringing the tram line, that was bringing the basic products that then went to make the iron, so the limestone, the iron ore, the coal, to the blast furnace, and they found evidence of that. So this is Horseshoe Pass here with the quarries here. So this line starts pretty much at the Ponderosa Cafe, or goes from the quarries opposite the Ponderosa Cafe. Now we have to point out the structure there. That's a pillbox. If you've driven down past the Horseshoe Pass, you have all driven past it, but I suspect that very few of you will have noticed it. It's one of my particular little bugbears to point it out. There's another one in Llandegla, because structures like that, Second World War structures, a lot have disappeared. Close to here, Rhuddlan, there was a chain home station, of which a lot survives, but not necessarily protected very well or at all. So, until you had railways, the fastest that you could go was on a galloping horse. Now, I would imagine, I've never done it, but I imagine that feels pretty exciting and pretty fast. But once you got trains, you were going much, much faster, 80 miles an hour, which in the late Victorian period, that was pretty fast. There's Queen Victoria, on one of her journeys from Slough to London, not an enormously long journey, but she asked the driver to slow down because it felt so terrifying to be going so fast, and she slowed it down to 40 miles an hour. That still would have felt very fast. And so having railways enormously improved how quickly both people and goods could cross the country. So from an industrial point of view, they were really valuable. Victoria, by the way, did come to this sort of northeast Wales area by train when she visited Bryntysilio in the late 19th century. So the first passenger railway is an Act of Parliament 1826, but there is a railroad with a steam train on it, built in Britain prior to that. That's the Stockton and Darlington Railway, and it opened in 1825. Someone's keen to get in touch. And that used a steam locomotive built by George Stephenson, but it was purely for hauling minerals. So it's an industrial line, but steam, but it's not for passengers. That comes a couple of years later with the Liverpool and Manchester Railway, Act of Parliament 1826, first passengers travelling on it in 1830. So that's nearly 200 years ago. And that first passenger train was quite eventful. It's when you see the story behind it, it's a wonder that so many railways develop. The opening of the first passenger railway line was attended by Government Minister George Huskisson. He was killed at the opening of that line. So the train pulled in. If you've been on Newton-le-Willow station, there's a plaque with information about this because it was very close. The accident happened very close to Newton-le-Willow station. And this is a painting of the accident. So this first passenger train had stopped, and all the VIPs and everyone had got off to have a little wander about and look. But then another, not passenger train, but another train is coming along, steam train, and everyone scrambles back off the line, back onto the train, and poor old Huskisson fell back into the path of the train. He wasn't killed instantly. About 6 hours later, he died. So it's a very inauspicious start to passenger railway travel, and that's the plaque at Newton-le-Willows station. But from then, there's not accidents like that in such a dramatic way. So in this area, the first railway line to come is the North Wales coastline, just the one that goes through Rhuddlan and Prestatyn. Chester Holyhead Railway Act passed in 1844, so 14 years after that first passenger train in the one where Huskisson had died. And that's designed by Robert Stephenson, so obviously it's coming along from Crewe, Chester, and along the coast to Holyhead. And that will have been an early one because, again, linked to about 20 years before, 25 years before that, the A5 road had been vastly improved by Thomas Telford, with the main purpose being to get Irish MPs quickly to Westminster, because they, following the Act of Union between Britain and Ireland, those MPs didn't sit in Dublin, they had to come to Westminster, so they needed to get there quickly. And the train improved the time that journey took. Improving the road cut the journey in half, but by the time you had a boat train, that was even quicker. And the line has some fantastic structures along it. The bridge now is both railway and road, but was originally built for railway. And the route largely follows the coast. So the bridge, interestingly, at the one that links Anglesey, is as high as it is. It didn't need, just getting from one side to the other, it didn't need to be that high. But at the time, you had masted ships. The Navy had, your mast was really high. So you needed to have the height so that ships could pass easily under it. The Irish Mail, that, as well as MPs, the post back and forth and all the information. The first time that the Holyhead train was used for that was August the 1st, 1848. And that again made an enormous difference to the time that took for important information to get from Dublin to Britain, and particularly London, with MPs and things sitting there. A lot of these lines were built by small companies, so a small company where you get to have a public meeting like this, a group of people coming together, asked to put money into a railway company, then you'd apply for the Act of Parliament and you would be the shareholders in that company, getting a share of any profits or not. But very quickly, these small companies were amalgamated into much larger lines. So the coastal line started off, you had the Chester and Holyhead Railway, but it then was incorporated into the London and North Western, LNWR, and right from the very beginning, LNWR were operating the trains. And they owned the line, the whole of the sort of West Coast line, London, Euston to Carlisle, and were keen, so this is a branch coming off that, the coastline, and keen to get people to use it, because we get people on your train to make more money. And so that then sparks the development of the coastal resort, so like Rhyl, so this is Rhyl in 1874, and then 1955. But 1874, we're talking about, what, we're 25 years-ish after, 30 years after the opening of that. So they're wanting to get people coming along the coast, enjoying it, so therefore facilities are built, because there was very little in Rhyl before the railway came. This is Chester Station, and I think Chester Station still has a record. It's got the longest frontage of any station built. It's a lovely building, it's a station, but not used to its full extent nowadays. And I curse it every time I pull up in front of it because the traffic is all over the place. You don't know where to go, and you don't appreciate the really attractive building that it is. And most of these small railway companies that are amalgamated, you get a standard design for the stations. Chester is particularly grand, but then if you look at along the line, Mostyn Station, the one near Abercarn, which is no longer a station, it's sort of similar to that central part, and one of the others, and the Holywell one and one of the others, it's very similar design, so you get the sort of standard, very grand, very well designed structures along the line, and here Rhyl in 1900. So you've got this coastal line, and at the same time, a bit later, but at the same sort of time, you've got another company coming together to develop the line that comes along the Dee valleys. So you've got the West Coast line, and throughout on, you can link in along into the Dee Valley, so to Llangollen, Corwen, and off to the coast that way. This very fanciful to me picture that's Llangollen Station. It looks as though it's been built on the coast, as if you've got crashing waves up against it. This is the Dee, because you haven't got the right side of it. It looks very coast-like, but that's Llangollen Station. Then again, along that line, you get very similar buildings. And you could get the train across to Barmouth, Dolgellau and Barmouth. So the Vale of Clwyd Railway was a spur from the Shrewsbury-Chester Railway. It's along the northern side of the Dee Valley. The Dee is very narrow, but the area that you've got there is very narrow between steep hills either side, and yet you've got the A5 on the southern side of the railway, of the river, the railway on the north, and the canal on the north. So you've got all these routes using that valley. 1859 is the date of the Act of Parliament, the first section, which is the bit that gets to Llangollen, and then it's extended further on, initially just for goods, not for people. But again, people started seeing that it's also coinciding when Factories Acts and things were being passed, so people were beginning to have a wee bit of leisure time. so might be able to get the train. If you were working in Birmingham, you might be able to do a day trip to somewhere like Llangollen or Getline, because you had a bit of time off, which you haven't had before. And so again, these places developed. Llangollen, interestingly, the main, I was thinking of the main high street as you go over the bridge in Llangollen and head out to the A5. The whole of that street didn't exist before the 1860s, and it's being built pretty much the same time as the railway is coming in to the town. That is Dolgellau station, which no longer survives. It's underneath, well, it was where the bypass goes around Dolgellau. But if you've ever driven through Corwen and seen the Ivor Williams showrooms, which is in the old Corwen station, very, very similar building. So we've got these lines developing. Obviously at Llangollen you have the Heritage Railway, so that a lot of railways closed in the 1960s, and following that obviously we've got the Beeching report. That is not what forces these lines to close. The Vale of Clwyd line, which I'll start talking about in a moment, closed prior to the Beeching report coming out. So it was already sort of beginning to be seen. You know, motorways were coming along, cars were becoming much more popular. That was how we were going to get around, so railways were beginning to close. But at Llangollen, although the line was taken up fairly soon after it closed, a heritage railway came in and still operates there today, further to Corwen now than it used to. So you've got the line along the coast, and we've got the line coming in the Dee Valley. And at the same sort of time, people were realising, well, if you can join these, that opens up the whole network as well. And at Denby, you've got a line that goes to Mould. So people are beginning to think about developing these lines. The Denby to Rhyl, or Rhyl to Denby section, Act of Parliament 1856, which is just before this line was started being built. So people are already thinking to link the two in along the Vale of Clwyd, but it was done in sections. So the first section that was constructed is from Rhyl to Denby here, and then it goes to Denby to Rhuddlan to Corwen. And initially that was 3 separate companies that then come together. And this is Rhuddlan station. So you can see we've got Rhuddlan here is the next station down from Borryd Rhyl, Sylasa, Clanach, then Trefnant, and then you come into Denby, and at Denby you could go several ways. You can go into Mould that links you to Chester, you can go up and across to the coast of Holyhead. So you can see the beginnings of the network developing, so that from a lot of places in the UK, you weren't that far from a station that you could walk to, and you could then end up at the seaside or in the major city, you know, fairly quickly. So Rhuddlan station, you can see the design of that, not at all dissimilar from the one I showed you at Dolgellau and Corwen. And here, that's the station here in Rhuddlan, and that's another photograph of it. And there's a couple on the wall over there. I noticed I haven't had a chance to look at the aerial picture at the back to see whether that shows the station. But the railway and the station is where the nature reserve is now. So the 2 ponds at the nature reserve were the water source for filling up, because obviously when you've got a steam locomotive, you need coal for a steam locomotive, but you need a lot of water as well, because it's the heat that turns the water into steam that runs it. So those ponds here were for topping up your engine with water. And obviously this map, it's not the first edition Ordnance Survey, I think it's the second. But so now though the bypass is sort of coming over here. But that's the station. That, I think, is that buried, partially buried now? But sort of,
Still there.
I couldn't find it, I think, and expose it. The line, this linking Vale of Clwyd line, closed to most traffic in the early 60s, about 63, but the line stayed down, and this thing called the Land Cruise was like a tourist route around North Wales. It sounds lovely, that you could get the steam train and you'd go maybe along the north coast and into, I don't know, Bessicoy or something. You were travelling around, and you might then go down to Corwin and then up the Vale of Clwyd line. And if you search online, you can find little films of some of these routes where people on the train at the time filmed them going around. And it must have been a wonderful way to travel around the area and to see it. But this is 1966 in Rhuddlan Station here. That's more what it was. This is 2008, so it's just pre the local nature reserve. And I think part of these steps are still visible, that whole bit, and that's about all that's still visible of the railway line, apart from obviously the ponds, but those ponds are managed for nature conservation now rather than as a feature of the railway. And this is where the platform was. So it just shows how quickly, I mean, obviously the station building was knocked down, and just how quickly nature takes over these sites. But these posts here are remains of the edge of the line. Moving south, we get to St Asaph. The station still survives at St Asaph. It's very similar sort of design. Again, this is it in the 50s. If you're in St Asaph and you're at the little mini roundabout by the cathedral, and the cathedral is in one quadrant, and Britain, something the pub on the corner, you go along the road that's by, it was painted yellow, it's not painted yellow anymore, there's a company that sell fires and things like that, and in the station building is a stained glass worker, so his studio is in the station, and I've not been on it, but when you look out of the back windows of his studio, you can see the platform behind, so you're looking out of these windows onto the platform. So quite a lot of St Asaph's, the actual station, does survive. And then you get to Denby, where there was an amazing looking station building. I wish I had seen it. It looks sort of French chateau-like, amazing. So that's a drawing of it, but this is a photograph. And that is in the area where, what is it now, Aldi and B&M Bargains, I think it is, or Homeland, one of those, that sort of area. And then in this area, a number of old railway stations seem to now be sort of shopping centres. Mould Tesco's is where the station was. Denby, this is where you've got the Aldi and things like that where the station were. It's slightly different, and I'll show you exactly where that is, although it's very close to where Tesco's is. But so the northern part of that line, Rhuddlan to Denby, opened to passenger traffic 1858. And the permanent station here in Denby was opened by December, 2 years later, 1860. Then it started on the bit south of that. Denby, Rhuddlan and Corwin Railway, another separate Act of Parliament in 1860. So that you can see they're working their way down. And so concentrating on Rhuddlan now, the site of Rhuddlan Station is pretty much where the craft centre, Rhuddlan Craft Centre is. I have a map that shows it more accurately. But it's the roundabout and the craft centre are where the station was. However, originally, the idea was it would be on the other side of town. So this, if you're coming down south from Rhuddlan here, you've gone through St Asaph, you're on past Denby, you're coming in to Rhuddlan, you come in down north in here, and the Aldi is just on the outskirts here. And this building here, Park Place, and in fact a little line of houses here, 4 3-storey, a terrace of 4 3-storey houses. were built speculatively because that's where the railway was going to go. I don't know if you know that area at all, there is a building that is called the Drill Hall. It's now where the youth services are. That was where the station was going to be. So some entrepreneur thought, right, okay, I'll build the railway hotel, get that all up ready for when the railway comes. Then the railway then ended up being built on the other side of town because this route brought very close to Rhuddlan Castle. So this was the route it was going to be, coming quite close to Rhuddlan Castle. You're near where the park is in Rhuddlan, the old park where the children's playground area is. And then you were crossing the river and coming out along, so that is where the station was proposed, and that's where this drill hall is. The Cornwallis Wests, who had by that time built a grand country house in the castle, only about, or less than 10 years before the railway was proposed, they had enlarged the house, set out fancy gardens. And Cornwallis West was one of the big investors in building this section of the line from Denby to Rhuddlan. So he could say, I don't want it near me, coming hoi polloi, coming really right close to, because his house was sort of in the medieval castle. So he was influential enough to say, no, it goes the other side, by which time it was too late for the investor in Park Place and these houses. They still stand there as this sort of testament to where the station was going to be. So you can see the Cornwallis West involved quite a lot. So the 4th of September 1860, one of the daughters, Miss Florence, now I'm not sure which is, I'm assuming, but this says, that one is Florence, I think, but who knows really. Anyway, she cut the first sod of the line, so the construction started both south and north up through Canreda and Quill. The southern part finished by 1863. It was a big occasion. This very poor photocopy lists all the people who were in this sort of procession, and it talks about the procession going to Rhuddlan Castle to collect Miss Florence Cornwallis West and her entourage. They then all proceeded down one of the streets in Rhuddlan, I think Wells Street, to then cut this first sod. Then there were all sorts of parties and this and that, different levels of party depending on which level of society you belonged to. And a special song written, and someone has promised, 3 years ago he promised to play this and record it, but I can't read music. But it was a big deal, the railway coming to Rhuddlan. And in fact, the person who wrote that song, and it's interesting, it's in English, but the person who wrote it, Thomas Hughes, is Welsh speaking, and a bard. So he had performed and won awards at the estate, but his grave is in the church in the centre of Rhuddlan. But the ceremony to mark the opening was very much led by the sort of landed gentry who were English speaking. And I can't resist putting this up. It's a very poor image, but that is a bronze thing about that big. And there were 2 of them found, oval-shaped things. They date to the Iron Age. They're called spoons. They seem to have some sort of ritual function, which my children always said, that means I don't know what's what. Ritual means is shorthand for archaeologists who don't know what they really mean. But these things were found in the spoil of the cutting for the railway line. And they ended up in the hands of the headmaster of Rhuddlan School, who was a Mr. Barnwell, who was very involved in the early days of the Cambrian Archaeological Association, which is still going, 178 years later. But they are really important. There's about 7 sets of them from the United Kingdom. No one really knows what their function was. But for me, it says, what other archaeology did this railway go crashing through? And I know that HS2 that has been it's stopping, it's going to Birmingham, and that's it. But as an employer of archaeologists for the last sort of 10 years, it's been the biggest employer of archaeologists because you're cutting a great swathe through the countryside, and they've found all manner of prehistoric archaeology, Roman archaeology, and in the middle of London, medieval. So it does beg the question, what else? It was just luck that someone happened to be walking along the spoil tip of the railway and found these unique things, nearly unique, but it just said, well, what else did they crash their way through? That Victorians were really good at building things, and they were much less bothered by all the sort of red tape that we have these days. But then, what was lost? So, Rhuddlan Station was intended to be the headquarters of this small railway company that was developing the line between Denbigh and Rhuddlan. And it was a grand building. So the railway line is coming through here, the station there, goods yard there, and coming down through the town here. The proposal was that it would come this way, and that's where those buildings are that look very much like railway buildings but were never used. It had 2 platforms, and at the station you had the 2 lines, so you could pass a train in the station, but it also had the goods yard and it had also as well a locomotive depot, but that closed by 1900, and I think this building here, which became the main sort of storage place with it at the station, must have been the loco building because it was big enough to get them in. So it was largely built because an agricultural community people needed coal, they needed all the food supplies for the animals. It was goods coming in and out largely, but it was a passenger line. And this little map on the left here is a late 18th century map of Rhuddlan as the castle. That's the square here, and that's the church. But all that is showing the places in Rhuddlan owned by the Middleton estate, which includes the castle, because the Cornwallis West are descendants of them. But why I put that there is because the plan of the Rhuddlan changed. The railway came and new roads were built because of the railway. So we'll look at maps of that shortly, but you've got Winstay Road, you've got Station Road, and you've got Market Street. All 3 of those roads in Rhuddlan were built purely because the station and the railway line came. This doesn't show the area where the railway line is, but it's an 1826 map of Rhuddlan. So the original proposal was the line would come down through here. But you'll notice there is, in front of the castle, a road. That also the Cornwallis Wests got rid of. It was the main road up from Corwen. They didn't want that in front of their fancy house either, so before the railway had come, they'd managed to move the main Corwen road. So this it's not the first edition, an early 1900s map of Rhuddlan. The line coming in from the north here, station there, goods yard there, coming through the town, and then heading south to Corwen. And as I say, the original idea, so we've got it was coming down through this way, was the original idea. And just an aerial view of that. So this is the modern day area, but you can still see the line coming in here. It came pretty much where the Long Parkway line is. The station was there, the main roundabout, and it's coming out through that way. And a resident of Rhuddlan had put this map together before I got involved at all, but I find it really useful because what it is an overlay of the first edition Ordnance Survey map, which shows the we've got the goods shed, that grey building, the station master's house and booking office, that grey building, and all the red are the lines. So we've got the main line coming through the middle here, we've got little outlying lines to the signal box, and line coming into an area around here where you've got cattle pens, so there must have been cattle transported in and out on the railway. So all that red and these grey bits are the station and the line. But underneath that, we've got the modern map. So we've got the roundabout there. So if you're coming from the Mole direction, you come to the roundabout here. Tesco's is there, Tesco's car park. Rhuddlan Craft Centre is that horseshoe-shaped building, virtually on top of where the goods shed was. And now, this whole area here, we've got the Southern Ring Road going around, but we've also got Long Parkour going through there. And that really quite shows where it was, because if you approach this roundabout now, you'd have no idea at all that it had been the site of the station. And that is what the station looked like. I've got some closer up views on it. It was a big building. So this is a picture of the station. I know it's before 1900 because it has this canopy in place, and there was a fire that burnt that and it had gone by 1900. So that picture is pre-1900, and that's the goods shed. And I think that must have been the loco shed before it became the goods shed, because it was big enough to get a loco in there. And you've got the carriages and horses going to the station to pick visitors up. The one in the front here was from the Winstay Arms Hotel, which is 400 metres. It's barely a quarter of a mile's walk from the station to the hotel, and they still sent down their carriage to pick up guests, because that also would have looked, that would have given quite a good impression. So this next one is after 1900, so you can see the canopy is gone, but it's a grand building. But as I said, it was built to be the headquarters of the company, but the company, by the time the line was running, was all part of the bigger LMWR, and so a lot of that was redundant. Part of the project that I was involved with was talking to people who remembered the railway, but also there are two people in Rhuddlan who came to the station as the children of the last station master. One was about 13, 14 when he came, the other slightly older. And so I asked them, well, they lived here, this was their home. What do you remember about the railway station building? What they both, first of all, said wasn't anything to do with the locomotives or the steam or people coming in to buy tickets. It was freezing living in there. That was their most vivid memory. I mean, it's got plenty of chimneys, but I don't think, it was not effective in that sense. And here we are looking at the cars, we're sort of late 50s, 60s, by which time the road has developed in front of the station building. But these buildings are still there. You can just see the hills in the background. Just another view on the other side of the station. So we're on the platform here. Again, the hills in the distance, but there's it's round about that building there. It's a chapel that still is standing. So again, it helps orientate where you are. Just the same sort of thing. So that is the Penbarris Pass through. But if you're going to more by my area, that's where you park. So you can see that from the station, and that is the chapel that is still there. And just another view across, getting later on in the life of the railway. This, when I first put this together, I said, thought to be the last train through the station in Rhuddlan. I gave a talk in Llangollen last summer, had this picture, thought to be the last train going through, a passenger train going through Rhuddlan, and a lady in the audience came up to me and said, it was. I was on it. I was 4 years old with my brother and father. And so this was the last passenger train through that was sort of serving Rhuddlan in the sense of it linking it up into Denbigh and up to the coast. The southern section down to Corwen had closed in the 1950s, but it was still open for goods traffic, and hence that land cruise line that could take you on this lovely tourist tour of North East Wales could still use the Vale of Clwyd line, because although you couldn't wait at Rhuddlan station to get a train to Corwen or Barmouth anymore, the line was there because it was being used for goods. The goods traffic didn't stop until the mid-60s, about 1965, and it's 1963 that this last passenger train at Rhuddlan came through. Had a signal box at the station, and this is the last station master, William Glyn Hughes, and it was his two sons who still live in Rhuddlan, who I talked to recently. And I think this must be near the end of his... He retired when the line closed here in the 60s, and he started his working life in Liverpool at the one, I think at Lime Street, and then came into North Wales and finished his life working here. And the signal box had the capacity to do more, but it wasn't fully used. And it's just another view. So there we've got the goods shed, which is where the crafts centre sort of sitting here, really. So if you visit Rhuddlan Craft Centre and you walk through the middle of it, head from the car park, but heading to the gallery at the end, and you're surrounded by, you've got buildings either side of you, that you're walking pretty much along where the line went as you walk through the centre of it. I think this is one of the roads that was built to serve the station road. This wall is still here. There's now a doctor's surgery here and the roundabout there. Lots of stories from people in the town of youngsters. If you lived one side of the town and you were going to the high school on this side, you had to cross this footbridge and you'd sort of wait there till the train came through and cut you in smoke or whatever. You'd also know whether you were early or late or, this sort of thing by the train going through. And this is the goods yard with various structures within it, but by the latter part of its life, it's where at the beginning we saw those pictures of carriages and horses, by the latter part of its life in the late 50s and 60s, it's lorries that are then transporting, whether it's coal or animal feed, or alternatively bringing things to the station to be sent away. So this is 1962, just before it closes. But it had, even at this stage, about 9 or 10 people working at the station. This too is the goods yard. There's the station building and gasworks. That didn't go to about the late 70s, 80s, I think. And again, the doctor's surgery is sort of about here, and there's a block of flats there now, and Market Street comes down here. But again, you've got the lorries that were distributing the materials around. And this is standing in Market Street. Market Street in Rhuddlan is another road that was built purely because the railway came. We're towards the lower end of Market Street. These Victorian buildings are still there. And now, as you look down here, you see the roundabout, cars whizzing around. But that's the view you've got. This is pre-1900 again, because you've got the canopy, and here the hills behind. And even the hills behind are different. Now, you've got quite a lot of forest on parts, and certainly peeping over from behind, because Clwyd Forest was planted mostly in the 1950s, at the time when we still needed things like pit crops. It was planted as a crop, but here, it's still the empty moorland up there. So we're talking, again, pre-1900, but a completely different view down that street. Standing there now, you've got no idea of what it was like. There are a few structures surviving still, and the line went, there's a terrace of houses in Rhuddlan here, Railway Terrace. Very attractive, I think. There's about 14 of them, but the locos and the trains went right in front. So going this way, they're heading, this one is coming up from Corwen, that one is heading down to Corwen. It's now a walkway. So that's one of, they're called railway walks. So one of the few clues that there is to the fact that there was a railway in Rhuddlan. This is the end of that railway walks, and the train went underneath what is now Wells Street. That building is still there, as is the Feathers pub here. But the train went under. Now if you walk on this railway walk, you get to about, I don't know, 100 metres before this point, and you start climbing up, because you're getting to the road level, whereas the train went underneath. And I suspect a lot of that is still underground. So just a reminder of where we are. The station where the roundabout is, goods yard where the craft centre is. We did a sort of memory gathering piece of work linked into this project, and people came across with photographs and things like that, and this is one of the station reporters giving the paper, because of course the papers would arrive on the train early morning, and one person we talked to described how when his A-level results came out, he had to go down to the station to get the paper to find out how he had done in his A-level, so he was there quickly before anyone else could see. And here the porter is giving this particular dog, which apparently went down to the station every morning to collect the paper and then take it home to his master. And there are still relatives of that porter, Ernie Dowler, in Rhuddlan. So the Vale of Clwyd line, as I said earlier, the southern part from Rhuddlan to Corwen closed to passengers in the 1950s, but the northern part, Rhuddlan up to Rhyl, kept working until the mid to early 60s. So the whole line closed to all traffic in 1964, but the formal closure was 65. But the line stayed down for a wee bit longer, so that land cruise photograph I had was 1966. So the line stayed a wee bit longer. But here in Rhuddlan, pretty quickly they started taking it apart, because obviously it has value. The rails are metal, they can either be reused or melted down, and pretty quickly they move in to start taking everything down. And this is the last station master, his retirement, his for whatever, however many years of service, and that marking the closure, and it starts looking scrappy very quickly. So the station building, the line, the rails have gone. It just starts looking very derelict. There's platform with weeds growing up through. It's just not, of course it's not being looked after, it's not used. A local firm that still is in existence, Jones Brothers, were given the task of demolishing the station. These railways across the UK were closing because we were all going to be driving cars and motorways were coming in to replace them. We needed a roundabout here to start controlling some of that traffic. So fairly quickly the station building was gone. And it's Jones Brothers who took that down. And ironically, or not necessarily ironically, 60 years later, when we were doing a project on one of the few surviving bits of the railway, Jones Brothers put some funding into that. This is that area where the railway went underneath the end of Wells Street. So that's the Feathers pub that's still there. And they're demolishing one of these piers, the one over there, still survives. It's covered in ivy, but that's the only hint that it was there. But I suspect what you've done is knocked this bit down and shoved it into the hole. So I suspect if we did explore underneath there, we won't, but that the tunnel will still be underneath the road. There are a few bits and pieces of the railway line remaining in the area. This is where it crossed the River Clwyd. It had a surface on here and then rails on top, but that bridge over the river is still surviving, albeit a bit bashed about. It's up in this sort of area, right next door to the sewage works, but there is a public footpath that goes right by it. And this, so imagine if you're standing here, but facing in that direction, that railway bridge over the River Clwyd is there, and this is the line as it's heading north, up towards Denbigh and up towards Rhuddlan. So that's still surviving. That's this line here. So the bridge is crossing the river and coming out. But then a couple of fields away, it just disappears, because a lot of the time, remains of railway lines when they closed were sold back to adjacent landowners. Some have remained as routeways, so the Prestatyn Dissa, cycleway, walkway, that's an old railway line that stayed in public ownership and is a route to walk around. An awful lot of bits of old railway lines were sold back to the landowners and ploughed up, and there was nothing left of information about them or evidence. Here's Railway Terrace now, this red brick terrace. I think it's 1863 is the date on it. And now you walk along here, and you've got to imagine there's a steam train coming through, and then under the tunnel at the end. And apparently originally it was planned that there'd be this one terrace on one side and a sort of matching terrace on the other side of the line. That never happened. But this, I mentioned when the railway was opened, there was this song written by a local bard. The terrace, 1864, sorry, not 63, the terrace was designed, the architect was a person called John Jones, who was also a famous bard, a winner at Eisteddfod's. So there's quite a lot of this sort of link into the works of the railway in Rhuddlan. And here we are heading south to Colwyn, bits of the line surviving, so this bank, the bank coming through the middle of that photo is heading south to Colwyn, and on the left-hand side we're heading back up into Rhuddlan. But it survives as a mound along the edge of the field, and that is coming along that part of the field there. But then you can see that field, not a hint of the railway line, it's all gone. So how I got into finding out more about this particular line, and particularly about the Rhuddlan elements of it, was through this crane, which sits in the grounds of Rhuddlan Craft Centre. And it has sat there since the Craft Centre was built back in the 80s, the original one was built, and the crane was re-erected. But nothing had happened to it in that 40 years, and it just needed a bit of TLC, really. And the local civic association applied for some funding from the lottery. I think they called it 15-minute heritage, so you could get funding for things that were within 15 minutes of where the applying body lived. This certainly met that criteria. So there was money to refurbish it and do some public engagement activities like an exhibition and talks and things. I managed to find that the crane says on it who made it, and it's this Richard Kitchen, Warrington. I've got a photograph showing you that. And when I looked up that company online, here's one of their adverts for these, they make weighing machinery, cranes and turntables, and that's from a trade directory 1862, bearing in mind the line was built 1863. And I suspect that the crane arrived as a fairly early feature of the railway. So here it is, this is before it was refurbished, but Richard Kitchen, Warrington. And the website, Grace's directory, which has a lot of information about past industries, mentions that there is this crane here in Rhuddlan. So I suspect there are very few other structures, objects that were made by this company surviving. So just a reminder of where it is, and this is just fine when it's working again. The crane is, you're hardly going to see that how it is there now, but when it was in use, it was on the opposite side of the line, down there. So it's not in its original location, but it is by where the station was. And until recently, I had no pictures of it I asked the two people who had been brought, well, the teenagers, when they lived in the station building, do you remember the railway crane? No, because it was just a bit of kit down the end of the line that wasn't of any particular interest. It was doing its job, taking things off and on the train, but it wasn't something that was stuck in people's head. But then somebody who lived, I think she lives in Northampton, but her family had come from Britain, and she posted this photograph on Facebook. And there is the crane in the background. One of these people was a relative of the lady who had this photograph. But there it is, in situ and working. And then more recently, these two pictures were posted on the internet. And you've got the crane there and there. So it was quite a way sort of from the station in the goods area of the station, so not something that people would see particularly. Not sure when these photographs were, obviously a very snowy winter, but I don't think it will have been 63, which was very snowy. It must have been earlier than that. And this is a photograph in the record office in Rhuddlan of the station and the sort of the agricultural produce and things that's coming in and going out, and it's that sort of stuff, things that the crane would have been used to hoist onto and off the train. And I was assured it wasn't used for coal, because apparently the coal would arrive in a truck that had a side that came down, and then it was left out straight onto the platform and carted away. But it wouldn't, the crane would have been moving sacks like those. And this is what it looked like in 1980. Again, a local resident had taken these photographs. I suspect if it had been a lighter bit of iron, it would have disappeared. It has scrap value, but it is very heavy. So it sort of kicked about the old station site for a few years. And in the 1980s, there were proposals to build a craft centre in Rhuddlan. And at that stage, the remains of the crane were put in storage by, I guess it was Clwyd County Council at that stage, and put in storage to be then re-erected. So that was, it was lucky. It could so easily have just been a bit of scrap metal and get rid of this. And now it's one of the very few reminders of the fact that there was a Vale of Clwyd Railway, came down with it, went right up to Brill here. But it's been in need of a bit of care, a bit of TLC. And that's what the money was able to do. And a local contractor, previously people had got quotes to do work on this, to take the paint off, repaint it. But all of those companies that have come to look and said, well, we've got to take it away. Well, that's lots of expense to get it out, take it to some fancy engineering works, bring it back. But this local chap said he was able to do it on site, so cover the whole thing in scaffolding, and sure enough, was able to both get the paint off and repaint it, repaint the beam. We didn't, this bit is not part of the original crane, because it wouldn't work. That was there, but the original crane would have had, it would have been set much more deeply into the ground. This might be set deeply into the ground, but we have no way of knowing. And the fact that this is propping it up, I suspect if we'd taken that away as being a non-original part, it would have collapsed. This sort of crane would have been very common at one time. There is a small version along the canal at Llangollen. It's not made by the same company, but if you go to the, you are the wharf tea rooms, and you see you've got the crane there, that would have been used for the same purpose, but loading boats. And here, we've got one, this is at Conwy, so this is the edge of Conwy Castle. And if you go to Conwy and you park in the car park that's behind the castle and you walk up through, catch sight of that. So I haven't walked down to it yet to see if it is the same manufacturer. I doubt it is, but obviously not being used now, but was the same sort of purpose as this crane in Rhuddlan. And I've alluded to this, alongside doing this refurbishment work, we were able to, we employed a company called Book of You. I don't know whether they've been involved in anything here, but they sort of gather memories and make digital books, so it's all available on the internet, talking to people about their memories and stories about the line, the railway line. So we've got Ernie Dowell, the porter, giving the paper to the dog, and somewhere it does mention the name of the dog, but I can't remember it. We've had people talk about the land cruise, people talking about meeting their father coming back from war, having not seen him for 3-4 years or whatever, and a stranger, but going to the station to meet them. Several people remembered being in primary school and going down to the Festival of Britain in 1951 for a day trip from Rhuddlan Station. It was a long day trip, but you could do it. You could walk to the station from your home, you could get the train, be in London, Festival of Britain, back home again, all in a day. So lots of memories being gathered and stories, and those are now online and can be added to as more comes to light. So we hope that more stories about the railway will come to light, and I think this gives a hint as to the sort of thing that could be done in other areas as well, because people here will have memories of the station, people in St Asa or the train. There was stories of, I think the boys' school was in Denby, the girls' school in Rhuddlan, and sort of little assignations and notes being passed that they sent, the midway line on the train station. So lots of those sort of social stories coming to light, reminding people about the fact that the train is there. So thank you very much indeed. If you have any questions, fire away. Thank you very much.
That was very informative and very interesting. Thank you, Fiona. As with many things, they open, they close. Railways were one of those things. I wouldn't worry about the terminology. I worked for the railway for 13 years when I left school. And the stations that I worked at, the kids used to come and say, can we go train spotting?
Yeah.
The engine men had engine sheds. They didn't have locomotives. So, you know, I don't think it makes a lot of difference, to be honest. But it's interesting that what has happened with anything that's no longer around us. Supermarkets seem to be predominantly responsible for taking over railway stations. And as you also mentioned, I mean, they're there for leisure facilities as well. Lots of railway lines. One that I used to live close to turned into a footpath, cycle path. So, you know, your health and well-being is being taken care of. I don't suppose anybody came by bike today, did they? No? Okay. And we have left over some interesting artefacts, as Fiona has mentioned the crane. And that is just one of many artefacts that's left. A lot of heritage railways still exist, but then, I mean, they're concerned that they can't get steam coal anymore. So whether they will continue, who knows? But that was very interesting. As I said, we started with the inception, we finished with the closing, we saw everything that happened in between, and subsequently the artefacts that are left behind. So thank you very much. Very interesting. Much appreciated. still got your microphone turned on. Sorry, carry on.
Can I just say, it's within Open Doors in 3 weeks' time. I think I've got a leaflet about it. It doesn't have the crane on it, but you would be welcome to go and see it. But if anyone is interested, I'll leave them on the desk then. Help yourself.
I don't know what's quite is going to happen with regard to refreshments. I think the cake is going to be put at the back for you to collect. But I understand that we can't walk around with hot drinks anymore. So I think they're going to be, in some way, shape or form, brought to you. Health and safety, you know. Health and safety. So there we go. No raffle. But thank you all very much for coming. I hope you've enjoyed it. Don't run away because there's plenty of cake and I don't want to be taking it home.